Everybody wants to know the answer to this question, but almost nobody actually asks it directly, because it feels a little uncomfortable. Where do I actually stand? Am I poor? Am I middle class? Or am I actually closer to rich than I think? Today, we're going to answer that with real numbers, not vague feelings, not vibes based on what car your neighbor drives. Actual net worth figures broken down by where people really land. And I promise you, by the end of this video, some of these numbers are going to surprise you in both directions. Let's start by making sure we're talking about the same thing, because a lot of people confuse income with net worth, and they are not the same thing at all. Income is what comes into your bank account every month. Net worth is everything you own. Your savings, your investments, your home equity, your retirement accounts, minus everything you owe, your mortgage, your car loan, your credit card debt, your student loans. Net worth is the real scoreboard. You can have a huge income and still have a low or even negative net worth if you're spending everything you make. And you can have a modest income and a surprisingly strong net worth if you've been consistent for years. This is why net worth, not income, is the number that actually tells you where you stand financially. So let's talk about what poor actually looks like in net worth terms, because the reality here is honestly kind of shocking. A significant portion of adults in this country have a net worth close to zero or even negative, meaning what they owe is equal to or greater than what they own. We're talking about people with essentially no emergency savings, carrying credit card balances, maybe renting with no home equity building up at all. And here's the part that surprises people. This isn't just people who are unemployed or struggling in obvious ways. Plenty of people with decent, steady jobs fall into this category simply because their spending has matched or exceeded their income for years, leaving nothing actually accumulated behind them. Now let's move to what most people would call middle class in terms of actual net worth, not just how someone feels or what neighborhood they live in. The middle of the pack, statistically speaking, tends to sit somewhere in the range of $100,000 to perhaps $500,000 in net worth, and that range is wide because it depends heavily on age. Someone in their late 20s with $50,000 in net worth is doing quite well for their age. Someone in their late 50s with that same $50,000 is significantly behind where they probably need to be for retirement. This is the part nobody explains clearly enough. Net worth benchmarks only really mean something when you look at them alongside age, because a 30-year-old and a 60-year-old should not be judged against the exact same number. Let's talk about what actually puts someone in that comfortable, financially secure middle-class range, because it's rarely one big move. It's almost always the boring stuff repeated over and over, consistently contributing to a retirement account for years. Owning a home that's been slowly building equity while paying down the mortgage instead of moving every couple of years and resetting to zero. Avoiding high interest debt, or at least paying it down aggressively when it happens. None of these things are exciting or dramatic. There's no single moment where someone crosses into this range. It happens through years of unremarkable, consistent decisions compounding quietly in the background. Now here's where it gets interesting, because the definition of rich in net worth terms is actually much lower than most people assume. When you ask people what net worth makes someone rich, they often throw out enormous numbers, 10 million, 20 million, numbers that feel almost impossible. But statistically, in terms of where someone actually lands relative to the rest of the population, having a net worth of around $1 to $2 million already puts you in a small percentage of households nationally. That number probably sounds surprisingly low to a lot of people, because our sense of what rich means has been massively distorted by what we see online and in the media. Where the examples we're constantly shown are the extreme outliers, not the actual statistical reality of what wealth looks like for most people who would genuinely be considered financially well off. This is actually one of the most important points in this entire video, so I want you to really sit with it for a second. The reason most people feel poor even when they're doing objectively fine is because we compare ourselves to an extremely distorted picture of wealth, not to the actual real-world data. Social media shows us the top 0.1% constantly, private jets, mansions, watches that cost more than most people's houses, and our brains quietly start treating that as the normal bar for success. So someone with a genuinely solid 7-figure net worth can still feel behind, still feel like they haven't made it, simply because they're comparing themselves to a completely unrepresentative sample of humanity that they see on a screen every single day. Let's break this down by decade of life too, because that context really does matter here. In your 20s, having any positive net worth at all, even a modest one, honestly puts you ahead of a large chunk of your peers, because so many people that age are still working through student loans or just starting to save anything at all. In your 30s, having the equivalent of close to your annual salary saved up is generally considered a strong position to be in. By your 40s, that number is usually closer to 3 or 4 times your annual income. And by retirement age, most financial guidance points towards somewhere around 10 to 12 times your final salary as a healthy target to actually retire comfortably without running out of money. These numbers aren't rules carved in stone, but they give you an actual real framework instead of just vaguely wondering how you're doing compared to some imaginary standard. Here's something else worth pointing out, because it changes how a lot of people think about this whole topic. Net worth isn't a fixed permanent label that gets assigned to you forever. It's a snapshot, a single moment in time. And it moves constantly based on decisions you're making right now, today, this month. Someone can move from that lower bracket into a solid middle position over the course of just 5 or 10 focused years, purely through consistency, not through some lucky windfall or lottery ticket. And on the flip side, someone can slide backward just as easily through years of lifestyle inflation, taking on debt, or simply never paying attention to where their money is actually going each month. So where does this actually leave you, sitting here watching this video right now? I'd encourage you to actually calculate your own real number today, not tomorrow, not next week, today. Add up everything you own, your savings, your investments, your home equity, if you have any, your retirement accounts. Then subtract everything you owe, all your debts combined. That number, whatever it turns out to be, whether it's negative, whether it's small, whether it's larger than you expected, is your actual honest starting point. Not a source of shame if it's lower than you hoped, and definitely not a reason to feel superior if it's higher than you expected. Just information. Real, useful information you can actually act on. Because here's the truth that matters more than any specific number in this entire video. Rich, middle, and poor aren't permanent identities that get stamped onto you at birth. They're just descriptions of where you happen to stand today, based on decisions made up to this exact point. And the decisions you make starting right now, this week, this month, are what actually determine which direction that number moves from here. That's genuinely the only part of this whole topic that's actually within your control.